Okay, so you want to run the National Crime Syndicate. It's 1931, and you're taking a seat at a table of 7 that sits above every organized crime dollar in America. The numbers game, the loans, the labor rackets, narcotics, prostitution, an entire second economy that no government has ever taxed and no company has ever filed a report on. Nobody has ever measured its full size because you built it not to be measurable, spread across so many hands that it can never be added into a single number. And the only piece anyone ever manages to put a figure on is the smallest one. The vice trade, the racket your own men consider beneath them, moves an estimated $10 to $12 million a year by the state of New York's own count, through 200 houses, and that's one city and the runt of the litter. You built it on the one rule: no boss of bosses, no one man at the top ever again, because you stood close enough to watch what happens to the one man at the top. And it all started with a war.
For years, New York's Italian underworld runs on the old model. One boss of bosses, chosen the way it's always been chosen in Sicily. Whoever's strongest wears the crown until somebody stronger takes it off him. In 1930, 2 men want that crown at the same time. Joe Masiria holds it, Salvatore Maranzano has decided he should, and every family in the city gets dragged into picking a side. For the better part of a year, the model produces funerals instead of profit. Gunmen on salary who earn nothing, rackets gone dark because their operators are in hiding, whole crews spending their working hours hunting each other instead of collecting. A war doesn't just cost what it costs everything the business would have made if it had simply stayed open. You're inside this, watching, and what you're really looking at isn't 2 men fighting, it's a badly designed job. Imagine a company where the chief executive's position is a thing you hold until someone assassinates you for it. Nobody takes that job for the salary, they take it for the throne. And a throne with no term limit and no board of directors stays worth killing for indefinitely, which means an entire industry's revenue is being held hostage by a title. You end the first half of it yourself. April 15, 1931. You're having lunch with Masiria at a restaurant on the Coney Island boardwalk. You excuse yourself to the bathroom, and by the time you come back, he's dead in his chair, shot from every angle. You've just handed Maranzano the war, and for about 5 months, he sits exactly where Masiria used to sit. Boss of bosses, same throne, same design flaw. September 10th, 4 to 6 men walk into his office at 230 Park Avenue posing as tax auditors, and they don't leave until he's dead too. 2 men, 1 crown, 18 months, and the lesson you take from it is that the men were never the problem, the position was. Because as long as boss of bosses exists as a title, it will always be worth more to kill for than to hold in peace. So you don't compete for the throne, you abolish it. What you sell instead of a crown is stranger than any racket underneath it: arbitration. The commission owns no territory, runs no game, lends no money. It's a board of 7 that takes a piece of everything precisely because it operates nothing. And what it charges for is the thing the war just priced for everyone: peace. A dispute that would have closed rackets for a year now gets raised at a table and settled by majority vote, and every boss at that table pays for the service the same way, by accepting that the vote binds him too. 5 of the 7 seats go to the heads of New York's own families: you, Charlie Luciano, Vincent Mangano, Tommy Gagliano, Joseph Bonanno, Joe Profaci, plus a seat for Chicago and a seat for Buffalo, so the country's other big operating regions get a vote. There's no headquarters, no letterhead, no minutes, no annual meeting anybody could raid. The entire governing body of American organized crime can convene over dinner and adjourn without producing a single piece of paper that had happened. A board whose whole administrative overhead is the cost of the meal.
Below the board, it looks like any regional company, because that's what it is. Each family runs its own territory, a captain manages a dozen or so soldiers, each soldier runs crews of associates underneath him, and a fixed percentage of everything moves up each layer the way a franchise fee moves up from a storefront to a corporate office that has never once stood behind the counter. Your own crew includes a young accountant everyone calls the little man, Meyer Lansky, whose entire job is arithmetic. He doesn't run rackets, he runs the money the rackets produce, and by the early 30s, he's doing that job for crews that aren't even Italian, operations your board holds no authority over at all, because a good accountant, unlike a good gunman, is useful to absolutely everyone. The flagship underneath it all is the numbers game, a daily lottery played on street corners where a customer picks any 3 digits, 000 through 999, and puts down a penny, a nickel, a dime. 1,000 possible numbers means the true odds against the customer are 1,000 to 1, but when a customer hits, your bank's payout at 600 to 1, and not missing $400 on every winning 1,000 is the entire business, an edge of 40 cents on the dollar collected in coins from customers who come back every single morning. It's a casino with no building, no wheel, and no way to lose, running on bets too small for any bank in America to want the deposit. And small bets at scale stop being small. Before 1931, Harlem's game is run independently by a woman named Stephanie St. Clair, and it's clearing her around $200,000 a year, while a school teacher earns $1,500, which means she's out earning 130 of them, a nickel at a time, and hers is only one of dozens of policy banks running in parallel, borough by borough, every day of the year. Then, the day before Thanksgiving 1931, the winning number comes up 527, a number half of Harlem happens to play, and the banks are cleaned out in a single afternoon. The only man standing nearby with enough cash to cover the winning tickets is Dutch Schultz, fresh out of the dying beer business and looking for exactly this. He doesn't build a numbers operation, he buys into a broken one, bank by bank, block by block, rescue money up front and muscle behind it. And once a bank takes his money, it isn't independent anymore. It's a division, feeding a cut up through him toward the same table you sit at. Stephanie St. Clair fights the takeover for years anyway, and later puts her own price on what resisting it cost her, $750,000, nearly 4 years of her business's best earnings, spent defending a company the law would never once let her defend in a courtroom. Every other layer beside it runs the same move. Find the customer, legitimate business refuses, then charge them for the refusal. The loan rocket lends to men no bank will see, at rates no court will ever be asked to enforce. The labor rocket sells union peace, a strike that can be started or, more profitably, promised never to start. And at the bottom of the stack sits the vice trade. By the mid-30s, the bookers who move women between houses have been consolidated under your people into one combination. The 200 houses, the 10 to 12 million a year estimate you already know, organized with the same layered percentages as everything else you own, and regarded by everyone at your table as barely worth the trouble it collects. Every layer pays upward. Associate to soldier, soldier to captain, captain to boss, boss to the piece the table guarantees, and nobody, including you, has ever added the whole thing into one number, because a business this distributed was never supposed to be addable. A man downtown is about to test that. The man is a 33-year-old lawyer named Thomas Dewey. In 1935, the governor of New York makes him special prosecutor against organized crime. And that's not a detective assigned to a case. It's a standing office, his own hand-picked assistant prosecutors, his own investigators and accountants, his own offices with the blinds drawn, funded year after year whether he convicts anyone or not. You built a structure that survives any one boss dying. What you never budgeted for was the government copying the idea, a permanent institution whose only product is you.
Dewey reads your model the way you read the old one. He doesn't attack the board. He picks the vice combination. Not narcotics, not the loans, not the unions, not the rackets that actually finance the table, because vice is the one business whose employees are also the most exploited people in the whole operation, and a witness with nothing left to lose is cheaper to turn than a boss with everything to protect. February 1st, 1936, coordinated raids hit every known house of prostitution in New York City in one night, and more than 125 women, madams, and bookers are taken into custody at once. Not to convict them, to flip them. One of them is named Florence Brown. On the street, Cokie Flo. On the stand, she recalls how the bookers talked about the business they were building. Organize the houses, her word, like the A&P. Syndicate them on a large scale. Run them same as a chain store system. The A&P, the grocery chain on every corner in America. She isn't describing vice, and she isn't describing chaos. She's describing franchise economics, layered percentages, central management, the exact architecture of every other business on your books, recited in open court by an employee from the very bottom of it. The state never found your books. It found your employees, and they knew the whole design by heart. Dutch Schultz isn't on the board, but he runs a piece of New York's rackets big enough that the board's peace depends on his cooperation. And when Dewey's office starts closing in on him specifically, Schultz proposes the one move that would detonate everyone's arrangement at once: kill the prosecutor himself. The board says no, and not out of mercy, out of arithmetic. Because murdering a special prosecutor doesn't remove the standing office, it multiplies it, turns one funded institution into a permanent national priority, and makes every business on all 7 seats more expensive to run in the same week. Schultz won't take no for an answer.
And now the design meets the flaw it can never vote away, because arbitration only works if every member agrees to be bound by the vote. Nothing in this business is a court, and nothing can force that agreement except the exact violence the board exists to prevent. So the board does the thing its founding principle says it should never have to do again. It takes a vote and orders Dutch Schultz killed. Not a betrayal between rivals, but a resolution, passed the way you'd pass a decision to close an unprofitable branch. October 23, 1935, he's shot in a Newark chop house, and he dies the next day. The peace between families runs on the identical enforcement mechanism as the war it replaced. The board didn't eliminate violence, it centralized the permission for it, and a system built so that no crown would be worth killing for has quietly made the vote itself the thing worth controlling. And the murder buys you less than the board thinks, because the office it was meant to appease doesn't stop. Dewey's case against Schultz dies with Schultz, but the same office, the same methods, the same flipped witness strategy turns straight toward you within months. 1935 was the year the model was supposed to prove itself unkillable, and instead it's the year the state picked its target. The good year is already behind you, and there will not be another one. Now let me tell you how I know all of this, and where the story stops being able to tell you everything. You built a board that never produced a piece of paper on purpose, so the government that finally caught up with you produced the paper trail instead. Theirs, not yours. Dewey's office charges you and 8 others under the compulsory prostitution statute, and on April 4, 1936, you're arrested. Bail is set to $350,000, the highest ever recorded in New York State up to that point, and 15 times the income you declare to the government, $22,500 a year, a mid-level bank manager's salary, sworn to under oath from a 2-room suite at the Waldorf Astoria you're living in under a fake name. The trial opens May 11th, and by the time it ends, the stenographer's minutes run to 12 bound volumes and more than 7,000 pages, one of the largest criminal case files New York City has ever produced, and every page of it still sits, to this day, in the city's own archive.
For almost 4 weeks, witness after witness, Cokie Flo Brown, Nancy Presser, Mildred Bolitzer, dozens more, describes the same layered structure you built everywhere else. Bookers moving women between houses like inventory between franchise locations, a cut taken at every level, protection money flowing up the way tribute flows up from every racket on the board. The jury believes them. June 6th, guilty on 61 counts. June 18th, the sentence, 30 years minimum, 50 maximum. Somewhere inside those 7,000 pages is a folder the government itself titled Workings of the Combination. The actual numbers, the actual percentages, exactly how many cents of every dollar moved from a woman on the street, up through a booker, up through a boss, onto a ledger.
It still exists. It has never been digitized, never been published in full, and the only way to read it today is to walk into a records building on Chambers Street and ask a city archivist to pull the box by hand. So when someone quotes you the precise split with total confidence, the exact price per customer, the exact weekly cut, ask them how they know. Because the honest answer, 90 years later, is still that nobody's finished opening the file. And what Dewey could prove was smaller than what everyone assumed you ran. Narcotics, the numbers game, the loans, the businesses actually financing the commission were never touched by the case. He got you on what he himself later admitted was a minor racket because the prosecution's strategy was built where the witnesses were, not where the money was. 30 to 50 years for the smallest business you ran.
You served 10 of them. December 3rd, 1945, the Board of Parole recommends your release. January 3rd, Governor Dewey, the same man who put you away, commutes your sentence on one condition, that you never set foot in the country again. February 2nd, you're transferred to Ellis Island. Days later, you're walked aboard a ship at a Brooklyn pier. And by the end of the month, you're back in the country you left as a child, permanently. The governor's statement that day includes one more detail, almost an afterthought, that during the war, the Navy sought your help, and you gave it, though the actual value of the information procured is not clear. 8 years later, the state commissions an entire second report to settle what that cooperation was worth, and even that report, written by the state's own investigator, can't fully close the question. The seat you built outlasts you by decades. The board never adjourns. So, do you still want to run the National Crime Syndicate? Then understand what you actually built, because it was never really a story about one man from a Sicilian dock town who ended up in a 10 by 12 cell. It was a story about what happens when you give an ungovernable business a board of directors. Every rule that makes a legitimate company boring and durable, succession planning, shared liability, a vote instead of a fight, you imported into an industry that had spent decades assuming none of it applied, and the result outlived every man who signed off on it, including you.
Charles Lucky Luciano died in exile, a continent away from the table. And the table kept meeting for another 40 years, seating men who were children when he built it, because an organization designed to survive the death of its founder will, and the price of that durability is that it can never again be stopped by removing one man at the top. He made sure there wasn't one, not even him. Remember that the next time you hear that arresting the leader ends anything, any organization, any era, any business built on structure more than on anyone's signature, because the structure is the thing that was actually dangerous, and structures, unlike men, don't stand trial. Subscribe if you want to see the next seat opened at the table, because some businesses don't die when their founder does, and that's exactly what makes them worth understanding. Thanks for watching.